Oh my goodness, did he seriously just do that? That was absolutely unbelievable.
The San Antonio Spurs are a legit title contender. So you got shooters, you got athletes. You've got a collection of individuals who have bought in defensively because they're anchored by the premier defensive player in the game.
Last season, the Spurs watched everything fall apart. They lost their head coach to a devastating stroke, their franchise player to a blood clot, and somehow finished 13th in the Western Conference. Fast forward to this season, and San Antonio has completely flipped the script. They're sitting second in the West. They've beaten Oklahoma City 4 out of 5 times. And they just took down the best team in the Eastern Conference, the Detroit Pistons. But here's the part that should scare the entire NBA. 3 of their best players are just 22, 21, and 19 years old. And honestly, we haven't even reached the most unbelievable part yet. Because this transformation didn't happen by accident. It took a franchise-altering medical scare, a trade almost nobody saw coming, and a coaching transition that could have completely derailed the team. Instead, somehow, every single piece fell into place. Everyone talks about Victor Wembanyama, and for good reason. He's a generational talent. But this story isn't really about one player. It's about how San Antonio did what San Antonio has always done. Build something that lasts. And this time, the blueprint might be their best one yet. So, how did the Spurs go from a team seemingly headed nowhere to one of the NBA's most terrifying young squads? From the tank, to the trades, to the coaching changes, to the exact moment everything finally clicked. Let's break down how San Antonio built the NBA's scariest young team, and why this could only be the beginning.
Another steal. Stephon Castle, gear up for showtime! Castle climbs the ladder!
Harper with space, still at Harper! The Harper, the hoop!
This time, Wembanyama, what a play! Off the glass!
Before Wembanyama ever put on a Spurs jersey, San Antonio was already planting the seeds of what would become one of the NBA's most fascinating rebuilds. But first, they had to turn the page on an era that had defined the franchise for nearly 2 decades, the Tim Duncan Dynasty. Tim Duncan retired in 2016. Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili were gone by 2018. And then came the Kawhi Leonard saga, which ultimately sent another key piece of the 2014 championship team, Danny Green, out of San Antonio as well. In return, the Spurs received DeMar DeRozan, Jakob Poeltl, and a 2019 first-round pick that eventually became Keldon Johnson. And with the foundational core gone, and the player once viewed as the franchise's next superstar leaving in a trade that left San Antonio with little leverage, the Spurs entered the most dangerous territory in the NBA, mediocrity. They were still good enough to win 48 games in 2018-19 and push the Denver Nuggets to 7 games in the first round. But after that, 32 wins, 39 wins, then 33, and finally, 34. The legendary playoff streak was over. For the first time in decades, San Antonio had no postseason appearance, and more importantly, no obvious path back. But behind the scenes, the pivot wasn't immediate. It came after a series of difficult internal conversations. The Spurs had asked themselves 3 uncomfortable questions. Where are we right now? Where are we actually going? And does the way we're playing still make sense for the modern NBA? For a while after the Kawhi fallout, San Antonio was stuck in the worst possible place. A middle-of-the-pack team, good enough to chase the playoffs, not bad enough to draft at the top, and not flexible enough to make the kind of massive moves that could change the franchise. That's a dangerous place to live. Because when you're picking 11th, 14th, or 18th every year, you need to hit home runs just to stay relevant. Limited cap flexibility, limited assets, no obvious path to becoming more than a 6th or 7th seed team. The Spurs saw the trap forming, and they decided they weren't going to live there forever. The first real hint came in 2020, just before the Orlando bubble. San Antonio entered the restart with long odds of extending its incredible streak of 22 consecutive playoff appearances. But instead of desperately patching the roster together, Greg Popovich leaned into youth. DeJounte Murray, Derek White, Lonnie Walker, Keldon Johnson, The Spurs started giving their young guards major responsibility, with DeMar DeRozan and Jakob Poeltl providing veteran stability. The team became faster, more switchable, more versatile, and suddenly, something started to change. They won 5 of their first 7 seeding games in Orlando, and entering the 2021 season, Popovich made it clear the philosophy wasn't changing. San Antonio was committing to versatility, multiple ball handlers, interchangeable defenders, more spacing, more playmaking, more decision-makers on the floor at the same time. The goal was simple but revolutionary for Spurs. Build lineups where 4 or even 5 players could dribble, pass, and shoot, where a center could become an offensive hub, where decisions were shared instead of built around one player dominating every possession. Optionality became the identity, and the draft picks reflected that philosophy. Keldon Johnson at number 29 in 2019, Devin Vassell at number 11 in 2020, Trey Jones at number 41, Josh Primo at number 12 in 2021, Jeremy Sochin at number 9 in 2022, Malachy Branham at number 20. Different players, different skill sets, but the same underlying idea: length, versatility, two-way potential. And there was another detail most people overlooked. The Spurs had quietly identified the 2023 NBA draft as the moment they could truly accelerate the rebuild. To maximize that opportunity, they needed one thing above all else: flexibility. And flexibility requires assets. Assets require patience. And patience requires making difficult decisions. The DeRozan sign-and trade in 2021 was a clearer sign, yet that San Antonio was fully committing to the rebuild. DeRozan was sent to Chicago in exchange for Thaddeus Young, Al-Farouq Aminu, a 2025 first-round pick, and 2 future second-round picks. And the Spurs weren't finished. Young was eventually flipped to Toronto for another first-round pick in 2022, the pick that became Malachy Branham. Piece by piece, San Antonio was building something. They weren't chasing a quick fix. They were accumulating options, and they were positioning themselves for one massive opportunity. They just had no idea yet that opportunity was about to completely change the franchise. Then came another major move. Derek White was sent to Boston in exchange for Josh Richardson, Romeo Langford, and protected 2022 first-round pick, along with additional draft assets that would eventually give San Antonio even more flexibility. But then came a move that really shocked people. The Spurs traded their homegrown all-star, DeJounte Murray, along with Jock Landale, to Atlanta, and in return, first-round picks in 2023, 2025, and 2027, plus a 2026 pick swap. At the time, it looked like San Antonio was waving the white flag. In reality, they were buying leverage and insurance for the future. Nearly 5 years after arriving in the Kawhi Leonard trade, Jakob Poeltl was eventually sent back to Toronto for even more draft capital. This wasn't a reckless teardown. It was strategic peeling. The Spurs understood that if their 2023 lottery pick didn't become a franchise-changing player, they needed a plan B: cap flexibility to pursue free agents, draft capital to enter future superstar trades, and enough assets to control their own timeline. Then came 2023. San Antonio finished with one of the worst records in the Western Conference. And this time, the ping-pong balls delivered exactly what the Spurs had been preparing for. Victor Wembanyama, the perfect outcome for the exact timeline they had spent 4 years creating. Yes, maximizing their lottery odds meant losing games. But even through the losing, San Antonio never completely lost control of the process. They didn't simply hoard anonymous assets while stripping the locker room bare. They maintained structure. They preserved the culture. They avoided long-term contracts that could destroy their flexibility. And, crucially, they surrounded their young stars with veterans instead of throwing the youngest roster in the league into the deep end and hoping they figured it out. Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes came aboard, and Paul's impact on Wembanyama was immediate. In just 46 games together during the 2024-25 season, Paul assisted on 121 of Wembanyama's field goals, one of the highest totals for any duo in the league. But the value went beyond the numbers. Paul brought discipline, professional habits, game management, and a veteran presence that became especially important for Stephon Castle, the 4th overall pick in 2024. Castle went on to win Rookie of the Year, and by the end of the season, he had developed into San Antonio's primary offensive option whenever Wembanyama was unavailable. That kind of development doesn't happen by accident. It requires infrastructure, and that infrastructure eventually allowed the Spurs to cash in on the assets they had spent years collecting. Remember that Bulls' first-round pick acquired in the DeRozan sign-in trade? It became part of the ammunition San Antonio used to enter the De'Aaron Fox sweepstakes. And when the deal was finalized, one detail mattered more than anything else. The Spurs kept their core: Wembanyama, Sachin, Vassell, Keldon Johnson, Castle. Those pieces stayed in San Antonio. Instead, the Spurs moved Trey Jones, Zach Collins, and Sidi Sissoko, rotation pieces rather than foundational stars. Yes, San Antonio gave up multiple first-round picks, but look closer. They still retain some of their most valuable future assets, including the Atlanta picks from 2025 and 2027, along with the 2026 swap. And those Atlanta picks could become extremely interesting if the Hawks continue to struggle. That's the beauty of what San Antonio built. They didn't have to choose between the future and the present. They could attack both. By 2027, their own first-round pick could be relatively late if this young core develops the way the Spurs expect. And the 2031 Minnesota pick? That's a completely different kind of gamble. A long-term asset that could become incredibly valuable years from now. Brian Wright and R.C. Buford didn't panic buy. They read the market. They understood Fox's interest in San Antonio. They understood what playing next to Wembanyama could mean for a guard's career, and they bought low on an all-star whose market value had fallen from its peak. Now, this season is starting to validate that gamble, but San Antonio wasn't finished. Then came another lottery shock. No, they didn't land Cooper Flag. But despite having just a 66% chance of landing 8th or 9th, the Spurs jumped all the way to number 2 in the 2025 NBA draft, and they selected Dylan Harper. Think about that for a second. The Spurs had already drafted back-to-back Rookie of the Year winners. Now they were adding another elite young prospect to a roster already headlined by Wembanyama, Fox, Castle, and the rest of their young core. At that point, San Antonio knew something important. Defense does. And that's where one of the most underrated offseason moves has made a massive difference. Lost in the headlines surrounding Dylan Harper, Carter Bryant, Fox's max extension, and the addition of Luke Cornett was another important hire, Sean Sweeney. The Spurs brought him in as lead assistant and defensive coordinator, and the results have been dramatic. San Antonio went from 25th in defensive rating last season to 3rd this season, trailing only Oklahoma City and Detroit. That's not a small improvement. That's a complete transformation. Sweeney has reshaped the defensive identity. More pressure at the point of attack, faster rotations, sharper communication, and, perhaps most importantly, options. Castle, Vassell, Champagny, Carter Bryant. The Spurs can throw different combinations at different matchups because they have length, switchability, and defensive versatility all over the roster. And then, behind all of them, stands the ultimate safety net, Wembanyama. His presence at the rim allows perimeter defenders to stay attached, pressure the ball, and even gamble for steals because they know elite protection is waiting behind them. The ripple effect is obvious. Vassell looks re-energized offensively, playing at a level we haven't seen from him in years. Even Keldon Johnson has taken another step. Effort was never his problem, but sometimes the impact didn't match the intensity. Now, surrounded by better defenders and clearer system, that tenacity is finally translating into results. Of course, not every draft decision worked. Josh Primo, the 12th pick in 2021, never became part of the long-term plan, with San Antonio ultimately terminating his contract. And missing on a lottery pick always hurts, especially when players like Alperen Sengun, Trey Murphy III, and Jalen Johnson were still available. Jeremy Sachin was another difficult decision. The number 9 pick in 2022 had obvious flashes. A high-motor defender, positional versatility, playmaking potential, inside scoring. But as Carter Bryant developed and San Antonio's identity became clearer, the fit became increasingly difficult. The Spurs couldn't find a trade at the deadline, so they made the hard decision and moved on. No unnecessary drama. No panic. The team simply evolved past him. And that's an important distinction, because sometimes rebuilding is about collecting talent, but eventually it becomes about choosing the right talent. San Antonio has now entered that second phase. Look at what this team has become. Second in the Western Conference. Top 3 net rating. Wembanyama emerging as a Defensive Player of the Year favorite, while averaging roughly 24 points, 11 rebounds, and nearly 3 blocks per game. He is warping the geometry of the floor on both ends. And then there's Stephon Castle. At just 21, he's building a legitimate all-defensive case of his own. Earlier this month, he exploded for a 40-point triple-double, becoming the youngest player in NBA history to record a December 12th 40 game, and only the second player ever to do it while shooting at least 75% from the field. The first, Wilt Chamberlain. And the so-called Area 51 duo has already made history too, becoming the youngest pair in league history to record triple-doubles in the same game, surpassing legendary duos like Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen. Think about the transformation. Just 2 years ago, the Spurs were dead last in the West. Now, they look like legitimate title contenders. A 22-year-old generational defensive anchor, a 21-year-old emerging two-way star, a 19-year-old rookie already trusted to close games, a franchise point guard locked in long-term, a treasure chest of future draft capital, and a coaching staff that somehow turned chaos into culture. They're also 20, 11 against teams with winning records. At this point, calling this a rebuild almost feels outdated. This is an arrival. The Spurs have always been a franchise that tries to do things the right way. No shortcuts, no panic, no desperate moves. Just patience, development, and precision. And somehow, after everything they went through, Popovich's stroke, Wembanyama's blood clot, a 34-win season, the uncertainty, the injuries, the painful roster decisions, San Antonio came out the other side with what might be the most dangerous young core in basketball. So now I'll leave you with a question. In a 7-game series right now, who wins? Spurs versus Thunder or Spurs versus Pistons? Has San Antonio already arrived ahead of schedule, or are we getting carried away by the hype? Let me know in the comments. I'm reading them all. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, hit the like button, subscribe for more NBA stories like this, and check out one of these videos on your screen right now.